Bob, good afternoon. My name is Michael Harrison. I'm a member of the Forts Colony Nominating Committee. First, thank you for volunteering to participate in this process to become a community volunteer, which is needed to help our community thrive. Welcome to this candidate forum, where you will be offered an opportunity to share with the community your thoughts on issues that impact residents here in Forts Colony and how you might participate in working these issues as a potential member of the Forts Colony Board of Directors. We have prepared several questions for you today, and we want you to respond to these questions so that our community has an opportunity to understand your perspective on key issues and how you might approach problem solving and making decisions as a board member. Because of the wide range of topics, we ask that you limit your responses to 2 minutes per question. We will give you a 30-second reminder when you are approaching the 2-minute time limit, and we will work with you as appropriate to ensure you've finished answering the question. And with that, if you are ready, we'll start with the first question.
Move on. That's fine.
A major issue that arose from the annual survey was the concept of Forts Colony becoming more of a multi-age range community. Several voices have made comments about the lack of facilities, programming, and events for families with younger children. How do you see the board of directors acting to address this particular issue?
I think it's a great question. I personally have seen a change in the population. I have now 2 new neighbors, both of whom have children under the ages of 12. They had replaced octogenarians that previously owned their houses. And I presume that we're having a lot of that going on around the colony. In view of that, it's not only the children that have to be dealt with, although that's of primary importance, I'm sure, for the parents, but these folks that are the parents are professionals. And I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that some of the facilities we have here in terms of communications are probably not what I'd call state of the art, like speed of internet and things of that nature. So set that aside. On the children's side, I think I've seen some things happening that I'm very, very pleased with. One being the way that the tennis community has picked up responsibility for training very, very young tennis players in large volume. If you go at the proper days at Westbury, you see surprisingly anywhere from 30 to 50 kids in training, just learning the fundamentals of tennis. That didn't cost anything.
30 seconds.
So I think as an example, I think we can look at things as facilities and find uses for the young people. At the same time, like the water slide is a facility we put in that had cost us something. So we've got both sides. We can do some things very creatively without spending a lot of money. And there's some times where we're going to have to take some of our assets and devote it to a new facility like the water slide that can enhance the use by youngsters.
Well, Bob, that's a good segue into the second question we want to ask here. The current board of directors has represented that the capital contribution fee, more commonly referred to as the CCF, this proposal is an initiative to offset unknown maintenance and unforeseen capital costs associated with the aging of Forts Colony's infrastructure. How would you explain this strategic financial effort to a resident who has questions? What is the CCF?
Well, as I best understand the CCF, and I've done some reading on what's been provided to homeowners and members of the HOA, it's basically a tax on the sale of a home, primarily directed at the buyer, but through negotiation and may actually be paid by the seller. But it's amounts to 2/4, I think, of the normal fees that we pay as HOA members. And I find it extraordinarily good idea. And we're not alone. We may be the last of the communities that has implemented that vehicle to supplement our income. But I think we're finding that almost every year we're having to edge up our fees, even though it may be a small amount. We're going to need ways of embellishing our income to avoid those fee increases, and I think that will help everyone. And that source of revenue could be substantial. So I'm very supportive of that idea, and I'm glad to see that we're moving ahead on it.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And Bob, the next question sort of addresses temperament, which is probably pretty important as we continue to explain the CCF. I think you would recognize that board membership requires significant skill in the art of compromise to achieve collective decision making, which means effective listening, empathy, and flexibility. Would you describe an experience of being associated with a team of strong-willed individuals and how you interface with them to achieve consensus to solve a common issue?
Probably some of the experiences I've had in the Finance Committee, as my bio has indicated. I was a member of the HOA's Finance Committee for almost 5 years. That's a collective of volunteers, as you are, and many are here at the HOA, and all with different backgrounds. And we've come up with a number of solutions, and one I can think of, the CCF didn't come from the Finance Committee. That actually came out of the Board of Directors. But the CIF, the Capital Investment Fund, was an outgrowth of dialogue that we had within a Finance Committee. A couple members are not any longer on that committee, but I was partnered with Don Hughes and Don Lehman, and we created that. That was another way of raising money, actually setting aside money for assets. Everybody has their ideas about all the things that we want in the community, and we never have put aside any monies, much as a household might have to do if they want to buy something like put on a deck or things of that nature. Sometimes you just can't fund it from 1 year's income. You have to set aside funds. So we came up with the CIF as the Capital Investment Fund as the vehicle to set aside certain amount of monies, and all approved by the Board of Directors, recommended by the Finance Committee. And that was a concerted effort, and it was a team effort, and I think it was a good outcome.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Since many of the candidates have lived in Ford's Colony for some length of time, what improvements do you think are needed here in this community?
That's a difficult question. The reason I say that is I have a high regard for the way this community has been maintained. And I think after reading some of the, not just this year's, but even prior years, the responses we get from our homeowners is that they're pretty much high on both the importance and the value of the environment here. The roads are kept well. We've got good landscaping, things of that, and they're kept maintained well. And for those, I've heard complaints about, some of the maintenance, but I remind people, for example, that if you drive the roads here, you're pretty hard pressed to find a pothole. And that's because we do a pretty good job of maintaining things. In terms of improvements, I had made a suggestion a couple of years ago about putting up a tennis practice wall, which just recently was approved and funded outside of the HOA by private funds. Beyond that, I don't see anything that's particularly of high importance for changes. I mean, some have some have supposed that maybe we would put a roof over one of the pools so they could use them all year round. But I would think that maybe our money could be spent better in other ways. I'm not sure how I would suggest that be done, but I don't see any improvements I could suggest.
Okay. Given your experience here on various committees and being a resident, what was one of the key reasons that drove you to run for a board seat?
That's a great question. And after spending 5 years, almost 5 years, 4.5 years on the Finance Committee, I got to realize and be exposed to not only the board, but some of the other committees like the RPM Committee and the Facilities Committee. And I feel I have assimilated quite a bit of knowledge, not just from that exposure, but from my own professional background and education background. I really felt I could offer something. And I think I have no problem with volunteering my time, but I think I now am to the position where I'm bringing some assets, my own assets of learning about the HOA that I can apply in the board of directors seat even more effectively than I've done in the Finance Committee. And that's what's driving me to elevating my exposure and trying to assist the HOA in the best way I know how.
Okay, well, Bob, thanks a lot for that answer. What 3 priorities would you suggest as being the most important for the board of directors to focus on for the next year?
Well, I think it's a statement I'm going to steal from what doctors have to sign up for. Do no harm. That means keep the community viable. That means keep it attractive, keep the real estate rates and continually increasing. Make sure that the financial viability of this HOA is sustained. And I think there's some positive roads that are being made in all of that. And I would like to continue that. And I think be a little more, I'd like to say that any position I've had in the past, in probably 45 years of my professional life, and even including the 5 years in the Finance Committee, I bring outside value that I believe would be put to great use at the board of directors level. And I brought that into the Finance Committee. And I think I can escalate that into the board of directors. That's why I'd like to do that.
Okay. Many of the Forts Colony volunteer committees are having a genuine problem recruiting new members. How would you, as a member of the board, address this problem?
I think we need to make it a lot more visible that the reason our fees are as low as they are. And I think if I've seen studies done on some of our, what I'd call competitive communities around Williamsburg, we are definitely lower fees than any of the others. And it's predominantly due to the fact we have volunteers. And if we don't keep manning the voluntary positions in some of these key committees, we can't maintain that, what I call a competitive edge of other communities. And it may impact on the viability of this community to keep our fees at a competitive rate. And I'm sure everybody has an interest to keeping those fees down and keeping the features up. So I think we just need to make it very, very visible. It's been done in the past. I just think it probably deserves to almost have a section of the Talk of the Colony devoted, even if it's just a page or a half a page, to highlighting where all these volunteers are and the value they're bringing to the community. And that value isn't dollars. That value is their time and their expertise and their desire to help the community.
Thank you very much. There's a view, and some of this may even be past tense, that Forts Colony will not replicate amenities that are available close by, such as a dog park, a gym, a year-round swimming facility, or a special events hall for theater, music, social gatherings, where cosmetics are important. As you know, our current amenities are somewhat limited to meeting rooms at the swim and tennis club with seasonal swimming available. What are your thoughts and feelings on this particular subject?
Well, I hate to seem financially driven, but I think I have to point out that there's a saying that you don't want your eyes to be bigger than your stomach. And you need to be very careful in how you spend our fees. You know, some of those fees are devoted to labor that we have that is here to keep the community up. And we do have vehicles to fund assets, and we need to be smart about those and set them in priority. I think several years ago, the facilities committee actually went out with a survey on what people would like to have. And at the time they did that, there was an indication that neighboring community was going to actually provide us with some proffers of substantial funding. And people had this great idea that we're going to get something like $200,000 or $300,000 influx. And how are we going to blow it? And ideas were coming out of the woodwork that made it sound like we just had a bottomless pit of money to spend. And I think we just need to be careful that we don't start putting some assets in our view that we can't afford. We do have some vehicles to fund things like that with the CCF and the CIF. But I think we need to take heart in the fact that there are facilities outside of Ford's Colony that can take care of some of those requests. It just makes financial sense.
Bob, thank you very much for those answers. We have one final question that has come from several community members, and it's a question that continues to come up quite often. And it's the issue of pickleball and tennis. How would you handle such an issue in a community where there are strong diverging viewpoints? How would you work through these difficult issues as a member of the board?
Well, I think there's a committee looking at some indications that the pickleball community would like to expand further encroaching on the tennis facilities. And that probably is a trend that's going to continue. I think we have to be respectful of both. I'm a tennis player, have been a long time. I see that the pickleball, club has expanded considerably. I don't know if they've got 400 to 600 members. The tennis club is well under 200. We do have in the tennis side, 6 clay courts and two hard courts still up in swim and tennis. The thing to realize on both sides is that tennis can only be played on the clay courts during non-winter months. So there's probably a need to keep at least the 2 courts in swim and tennis available to tennis at the very least during winter months. I don't see a problem in the suggestion being made by the pickleball folks to reline those courts so they can be dual used for pickleball and tennis. That doesn't bother me much. I do think, though, in the winter months, the pickleball folks should be reacting to the scheduling that is done by the tennis community. And in those winter months, they should respect the reservations being made and let the tennis drive that. During summer months, I think the tennis community has adequate use of 6, soft courts. And I think the pickleball community could expand into those 2 hard courts without too much trouble. I don't see that the tennis folks use those as much during the summer months. They rely on the soft courts. So I think we can work it out between the two communities, but they've got to be very cognizant of the needs of both communities and what time of year it is.
All right, Bob, thank you very much for your thoughtful answers to these questions that came from both the nominating committee as well as the community. They all appreciate your willingness to run for a board seat and to work to make this a much better community. We really appreciate your time, and all the best to you.
Thank you. Good questions.